that big. It's kind of beautiful. Look at it. It's really nice.
That right there, I mean, you need to take a moment just to revel in the splendor of what's happening.
I got to be a little bit honest with you. I'm nervous, not just because of the giant Shon Morris head that sits behind my right shoulder.
Well, first of all, every time that thing appears, fertility rates throughout the free world decline. So someone's going to be held responsible for that. There's no fact to the rumor, Dave, that when I get a haircut, they have to put a snow fence around it. That is one giant dome.
It's a large cranium.
It is.
It's really nice.
Yeah. Are we going to do this or what?
We're gonna see how long I can go without saying anything, knowing how much you hate this.
Yeah. Well, my whole body's a headshot. That's disturbing.
And those 45 seconds right there, why I got so excited when our esteemed producer, Jesse Linares, told us that tonight we would be bringing back What's Impressing Shon Morris. Shon Morris and his head are both here to tell you what's floating around in there. Sometimes it's disturbing, but when it is about what's impressing you, it is about what's happening or what has happened on the basketball court. And Caleb Swanigan happened all year long for the Boilermakers.
Rick, from the beginning of the season with McNeese State all the way to the season-ending loss versus Kansas, the sophomore Caleb Swanigan did things to impress you, not just with what he did statistically, but how hard he played. He brought it every night for Coach Matt Painter and the Purdue Boilermakers. He went through the draft process a year ago. They told him, hey, you need to become a more consistent shooter, and he certainly accomplished that feat. 54% from the floor, 79% from the line, 45% from three. He puts up 28 double-doubles. And, Rick, I think that he had arguably one of the best seasons that this conference has seen, at least in the last decade, not just in what he put up statistically, but how much he improved. I think you can make a case not just for the fact that he was the league's most valuable player, you can make a case for him for the most improved player as well.
Swanigan did not win the Wooden Award on Friday night. That went to Kansas's Frank Mason. What was unexplainable was that he didn't win the Power Forward of the Year award. That went to Baylor's Jonathan Motley. I believe we should all demand a recount. Well, Swanigan was like a grizzled vet as a sophomore because one of the other things that impressed you throughout the course of the year was the quality and quantity of freshmen who made immediate impacts on their team.
One of those freshmen was on the aforementioned Purdue Boilermakers in the form of Carson Edwards. But to your point, Rick, there were a lot of teams that have a very bright future, not only next season, but moving forward with multiple freshmen. Maryland comes to mind with the performance of guys like Kevin Herter, Anthony Cowan, as well as Justin Jackson. Then you go up to East Lansing. You've got guys like Miles Bridges. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. Nick Ward, you want to talk about a guy that got overlooked? How does this guy not make the all-freshman team? Demand a recount on that. It must have gone to the Electoral College. And then with Penn State, you have guys returning: Mike Watkins, Lamar Stevens, Tony Carr. There are a lot of outstanding players. Iowa City, the future very bright as well, led by freshmen like Jordy Bohannon as well as Tyler Cook.
And there were the regulars back at the top of the standings. Wisconsin once again inside the top four, once again into the Sweet 16. But there were also a couple of teams that impressed you with their turnarounds from last year to this season.
We'll start in the Twin Cities with the job that Coach Richard Pitino did. A season ago, the Golden Gophers won 8 games. They tripled that, Rick, to 24. And as a result, they are rewarded in terms of accolades. Nate Mason, a first-team all-conference performer. Reggie Lynch was the Defensive Player of the Year. And then you had also along the back line, you had Reggie Lynch and Eric Curry doing an outstanding job. This was a team that on the defensive end was so impressive. Amir Coffey, a member of the all-freshman team. And then with Rutgers, you had a team that really put forth the effort on the defensive end of the floor. Minnesota did it in terms of going from 8 to 24 wins. Not necessarily as impressive in terms of the number of wins put forth by Rutgers. But, Rick, this was a team that couldn't guard me on one bad wheel a year ago. This season, they locked down on the defensive end of the floor and decided, look, we're going to make our statement on the rebounding end of the floor. They averaged 15 offensive rebounds per game. They led the conference in that category. They retrieved 38% of their misses. So a lot of the effort plays that might have been missing in the past were certainly present for Coach Steve Peichel. They're building a foundation on the defensive end, much like Minnesota did this year as they led the conference in field goal percentage defense as well as defending the three.
Both you and I believe that Steve Peichel is the right guy at the right time and that it won't be long until Rutgers is contending at a much different and a much higher level than they have been in the first couple of years inside the Big Ten. Now, the last topic of conversation is a hot-button issue, especially after what happened in the national championship game between Gonzaga and North Carolina. Almost no flow. So many fans watching were criticizing the officials for that. What's your stance?
I'm actually impressed by what the officials did throughout the course of the year, Rick. This was a game in the national championship game. Yes, it did not have a lot of flow, but the officials didn't force guys to shoot three-pointers like they were trying to put it through the backboard. They didn't miss the shots in the lane, especially by Gonzaga early. There were 22 fouls called on each squad. Foul shooting was very poor. Yes, there were some missed calls, but the thing that impressed me about the officiating throughout the course of the year is that it was called the same way, by and large, in November as it was in March. Now, if teams want to point at the officials, they could certainly do that. But the officials had nothing to do with the fact that there were a lot of opportunities on the offensive end missing in the national championship game. And people like to say, well, let the players decide the games. You want to do that? Then go back to what you said 4 or 5 years ago. The only thing that was notable about the Duke Butler game from a few seasons ago, it's most known from a missed shot, right? Because the offensive flow just wasn't there. I think by and large that the game in the national championship game was an aberration, and the officials had a lot to do with that in a positive way.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years ago we called that mall ball, and nobody wants to see that. They want to see more of that freedom of movement. The problem, though, if the players don't adjust as quickly as the officials, we saw what we saw on Monday night in the national championship game.